Would you two mind bringing your IDs over so I can swipe you in? Thank you.
Okay.
Alright, if he comes
I'll
up
try to
here,
accept
I'll let you know.
Okay. I'll
If
try
you
to.
miss him somehow. I was actually like, there
you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's not as important.
Are all the panelists in person? There's one. They're virtual, okay.
There's one virtual and looking for one. And
And our Muslim friend, we were still, yeah, gotcha. Okay. I'll kind of like share. Perfect. Very excited. This is very nice. You all have such a good time.
it hasn't even started yet, Laura.
I know.
I'm included in this email.
So,
Front and center here?
yeah, one of our panelists is going to join us on Teams.
Okay.
So we're kind of like panelists.
Okay.
So, no.
Hi. I'm Christina.
Hi, Christina. Very nice. Lucas.
I'm Laura Klein. I'm the director of administration.
Oh, very nice.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you so much for being here
My
today.
pleasure.
It's great to have you.
Thank you. It's good to be here. First
Excited
time
for this
really on
connection.
campus.
Yeah. Well,
Good to be.
we got good. I've had hands off with this whole process pretty much. Because I got such good student leaders.
That's a good feeling, isn't it?
Anderson,
Just to
yeah.
be able to like
It's true.
let it happen.
I just show up to the event and like enjoy the conversation.
Take a little credit for it. That's the way to. That's good management.
They make me
right
look
there.
good, right?
That's right. That's right.
Right, yeah. Excited to hear what you got to say. To share
Yeah,
with us
happy
today.
to do so.
Yes, if you. I'm gonna get on the other side because using the computer upside down and backwards is hard. It should be like these little dots.
Can they hear us online right now?
Yes,
Yes.
my mic is on.
I can hear you.
Thank you, Jordan. Can you, let's keep. Thank you, Jordan. All right, great.
A real tight.
Yeah, no, they took away the extension cord.
Oh, that's a
So
bummer.
this is the only, what
Okay.
we got.
That's all right.
So. So, started. How you doing?
Hi there. Good, thank you.
How you doing? Sir, United.
Nice to meet you. Lucas.
All right, everybody, we are going to get started here in just a minute. So if everybody online wouldn't mind turning on their cameras so that we can all be in this space together, that would be great. I'm going to start by introducing myself. My name is Christina. I am an Interfaith intern here, as well as Rachel and Sophie in the back there. So we have been working hard to put this together. So I'm excited to see where the conversation leads us. We have 3 panelists today. We have Father Lucas. Okay. We have Murley on the virtual screen, and we have Bilal right there. So let me jump over here. So if we could just kind of start by just going across, and everybody can just introduce themselves, what their faith tradition is, and then your favorite way to connect with the divine.
Sure. Just leave the mask on the whole time or take it off if you're speaking. What do you do to the professors?
I'm not entirely sure.
Okay, all right, okay. That's fine. Some people, no, that's fine. I want to follow whatever you do. Some people are like, you can't see the fake, whatever. Okay, all right. I'm Father Lucas Rice. I'm the pastor of St. Michael Orthodox Church on Heights Lane and Furman Boulevard. So we are part of what's sometimes called the Eastern Orthodox tradition. It is, as we would say, one of the oldest branch of Christianity. This is a Catholic institution, and so we went our separate ways about 1,000 years ago too, And there are different flavors, but all Orthodox churches are the same. So there's a Russian church, Greek church, whatever, just kind of different flavors of the same sauce, if you will. And so I'm honored to be here and humbled to be representing my whole tradition. My favorite way of connecting with the divine is through our liturgy. Y'all call it the Mass, those of you who are Catholic, but the Divine Liturgy, serving that, as well as just the regular services of the church, Matins and Vespers, and so on. Maybe not terribly exciting, but that's my favorite way.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me? Fine.
I can hear
Give
you.
us 1 second. We're going to turn you up.
Let's try that.
Say hello again.
Hi, myself Murali. Good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thanks for giving me this opportunity to talk about my faith. I follow Hinduism very closely. I'm from India and came to US 12 years back. And normally we connect with God. We chant Sanskrit slokas, as well as we go to temple as well, where we do mass chanting. And besides chanting, we do meditations as well. Meditation is basically means you concentrate on the present moment and to be present. That's what mainly we do in meditations. And normally we do for 20 to 30 minutes. And we do chant a lot of slogas based out a language called Sanskrit. That's how we connect with God normally. Any questions?
I'm Bilal Qazi. I'm with the Muslim tradition. I don't have any sort of title or anything. I'm just a member of the community. And I think my favorite way is reading Quran, specifically in the Arabic version, which I think is the best because when you read it in Arabic, we add like sort of a tune to it, almost like singing. And it's really nice to, like, you get meaning from it, but also it's nice to hear your own voice and hear other people read it as well. I think that's probably my favorite point.
Awesome. So in what situations do you prefer like structured prayer or rituals? And are there any situations in which you prefer more non-traditional means, whether it's music, art, like, you know, being out in nature? Like, what situations do you feel?
So it's critical for us to remember that, you know, God is everywhere. And so it's not that the only way we can connect with him is through liturgy or through scripted means. People oftentimes think that a church building and prayer books and liturgy, that we do those things for God. Those are for us. Those are helpful for us. We believe, I mean, I would think it's a bit anthropomorphic to say, but those things are pleasing to God if we do those faithfully and conscientiously. But those primarily benefit us. So as Orthodox, our kind of default mode is to use something from our received tradition. So if I'm visiting someone in the hospital, I have a book that has a prayer for just about every situation you could imagine, including many, many, many that you wouldn't imagine. They were written a long time ago, and so if you want to plant a bee farm in your backyard, an apiary, I've got a prayer for that. If you want to dig a well, I've got a prayer for that. We don't use these things as much, but they're still there. And in times past, those things were incredibly important. Nowadays, you know, the world is an increasingly diverse and complicated place, and so we don't have prayers for everything. There are times where I find, or if just the occasion warrants it, I think the person needs it, I'll just close my book and offer a free prayer. Partly because we are sacramental and liturgical, okay? Someone once, I had a professor that once said, the Orthodox are like the Catholics with more smells and bells. That's not the most uncharitable characterization. I mean, I'd like to think we're a little more than that, but that's not totally unfair. So certainly that's comfortable for us, and part of me kind of recoils when people say, my dad just said the other day, you know, I get up early to go play golf, and I swear I connect with God out there. And I'm like, well, that's convenient for you, isn't it? Because you love playing golf. Like most of the time when people connected with God, it involved some trial and sacrifice. And so, not saying you can't connect with God on the golf course, but or out in nature. But there are those moments, and it's usually when I don't see it. Usually in those moments of quiet. And I would say just in general, silence has been one of the best ways, paraliturgically, that I connect with God. Just being quiet. Putting down my phone for 5 minutes, for goodness sakes, and just listening.
Marley?
Yeah, we do have structured prayers. We do daily prayers, preferably in the morning after taking bath, and we do little lamps as well. And we do we do prayers in the temple as well, where where one person lead the prayer, and we do sometimes we do use instruments as well, like harmonium or piano and a keyboard. Um, and one person lead means whatever he chants, the other people keep repeating it. That's also one way of chanting. And sometimes we do offer flower as well while chanting to the deity in front of us. Yeah, that's the normal way of chanting in our tradition.
In Islam, I resonate with a lot of what you were saying, because it's very much that way. We have what are called du'as, which are basically a kind of prayer, which is when you just supplicate on your own to God. I mean, there's one for drinking milk, there's one for saddling your camel. You know, we have hundreds of prayers just like that. And then there's the organized prayers, which are called salahs, and those are the 5 daily prayers that you have to do. And so I would say and the same thing as you said, God is everywhere, and his creation is everywhere, and whatever you do isn't to help him, or it's helping yourself, and by that nature, pleasing him. And so if I'm doing a good deed, if I'm not doing it for God necessarily, maybe I'm just helping someone, I'm giving someone a ride to somewhere that they need to go or something like that. And then as I'm giving them the ride, I think to myself, this is sort of something that I could be doing for God, and then you make the intention, and it's sort of like that's an untraditional way of just kind of on the spur of the moment, like thinking about God and thinking, I dedicate this practice to him, more or less.
So then are there any like communal practices that your tradition emphasizes? And like which ones do you feel most connected with, or do you feel most connected when you're, more in solitude and like situations like that?
So community is essential to our spiritual existence. No man is an island. And so we have no form of, like what the Latin tradition has is the missa privata, the private mass, where a priest can be by himself and offering liturgy. If we're going to offer Eucharist, we have to have people. There has to be a community gathered together. And it's very normal for us when we do anything to open it up to the public. It's relatively unusual, but in our parish, we have a full cycle of services. So we have church every day, and that's open to the public, and it's attended. People come to that. They come to 7 a.m. morning prayer services. I hate 7 a.m. I love the service, but I hate the 7 a.m. part. I can't believe the number of people that are willingly getting up at that time. So certainly, though, that's done once again for the people and done in community. The goal in any liturgical setting is that, and this is going to sound maybe contradictory, but the goal is that we're all going to be doing the same thing, but we can be doing it in our own way. So we have a received tradition that tells us that we're going to do certain, and I think there's a question about the physical aspect of spirituality. There are certain gestures and postures and things like that we do, and that's a common tradition in all of our, that's a common theme in all of our traditions here is all of that. And not all religious traditions have that to the same degree, actually. Pretty much all strands of Islam, and as I understand it, Hinduism as well as a norm, utilize gestures and postures and see that as an important thing. So, we have that, and there are times where we kind of do that, and there's, as I said, what I would call a received tradition. There's just what most of us would do. But if one person doesn't do it, no one's clucking their tongue. We had a service recently where typically we would do full body prostrations. That's a characteristic feature of Islam as well. Just, bowing down. I slipped and fell in the garage about a month ago and landed harshly on my knee while I was trying to change my oil. And so I couldn't do that without looking really stupid and hurting my knee again. And so I didn't do that. And you know what? No one said anything. When the celebrant didn't do it, it's fine. So there's tremendous personal latitude for those things.
Really?
Yeah, we do also do community prayers in the temple and all, mostly with large gatherings. And we do individual prayers as well at times. And your daily prayers might be an individual prayer mostly, where you devote 10 to 20 minutes doing chanting of various shlokas, plus 10 to 15 minutes meditation as well. And as he mentioned, we do also prostrate at the end of the prayer in front of the God. And we also do some sort of if we made some mistakes, pardon us, and we devote everything whatever we did for the God at the end of the prayer.
In terms of community, a lot of things that our religion encourages can be done solo. So like there's the informal prayer and the formal prayer, and both of them can be done on your own or in a group. It really doesn't matter a whole lot. In terms of community, we have 2 celebrations every year, which are Eid and they're both Eids, Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha. And those are always really meaningful to me because it's usually to celebrate something. So like Eid al-Fitr is after the end of Ramadan, which is the month of fasting. So then it's sort of like a celebration of, you made it through the month, you haven't managed to fast all that time. Here, celebrate. And get together early in the morning, it's usually like 5 a.m. Like at the crack of dawn, we're all gathered together and we have like a sermon, and it's a great time. There's like usually a lot of events and stuff. And then we also have Friday prayer every Friday, which is basically like Sunday Mass. It's like a big prayer where everyone is supposed to get together and there's like a special sermon given and stuff like that. And like both of you were saying, you're referring to the traditional organized form of prayer, the Salah, where pretty much the whole thing is different postures, getting up, getting down, bending in different ways to God. So, yeah.
So you all started kind of touching on kind of physicality of, prayer and connecting with the divine. So we're going to use that as a segue into like in what ways do you make like the spiritual concepts real to you through your physical body movements? So like how do you stay and like feel connected to the earth while you're, connecting with the divine?
I'll say at the outset, there's a reductionist tendency that Americans it's just woven into the American way of thinking, where we want to say, well, okay, what are the extremes, or what do we have to do, what do we don't have to do, what's essential? And so the idea is, if you can pray to God while you're taking a shower or walking your dog, isn't that enough? Why do you have to go to church? Why do you have to adopt a specific prayer? And the thing is, we once again benefit from those things uniquely. Yes, I think God can hear you no matter where you are or what you're doing, but these postures benefit us incredibly. The default posture of prayer in the Orthodox tradition is not seated and it's not kneeling, but it's standing. And that's done on purpose because we want our bodies to be at attention, and whatever the body is, the soul will follow. That's critical to Orthodox anthropology, to how we understand the human being. The soul and the body cannot be easily divided. They're not naturally divided, which means that death necessarily is very unnatural, okay? So we can't necessarily experience one thing. Everybody during the pandemic has suffered to some degree. We've all been affected with at least intermittent bouts of depression or anxiety. And of course, what you'll find is that as you feel that in your soul, your body mirrors that. As you suffer in your body, as you eat poorly, you eat a bunch of comfort foods, a bunch of grease or whatever, then you're going to start feeling down as well. And the soul can mirror what's happening in the body and vice versa. So these postures and positions really help guide us. And so by literally making yourself get up, stop what you're doing, and stand at attention, that means something. The sign of the cross, which all Catholics are aware of. I don't know if this class is mostly Catholic. I'm saying this because I know Bellarmine is a historically Catholic school, but making the sign of the cross is something, all Catholics know. Orthodox do it more than that, and it's something we'll do. An average practicing Orthodox Christian will do it dozens of times throughout the day without even thinking about it. And it involves a special position of the hands. There's something we do with our fingers, and right here we're communicating the Trinity, our belief in the Trinity, and the two natures of Christ. And then we touch our forehead, down to our belly button, right shoulder and to the left. So it's opposite the Catholic tradition like this, okay? And this is, I think, not unintentional, okay? Because whatever's going on with our brain, we know a lot of stuff's going on with our brain. There's a lot of neural activity, right? There are also neurons in the gut. There are neurons in the heart. And the sign of the cross literally traverses all of those parts of experience. And so you're taking the thing, and most of us are right-handed. So the way we experience the world through touch, right? I'm using that to remind my mind and my gut and crossing my heart. Even that, I mean, I really think on a biopsychological level, that really is quite meaningful just to, and it's something you can do. You're crossing a mud puddle and you don't want to fall in, you make the sign of the cross. See a traffic accident, oh, I hope no one's hurt, you make the sign of the cross. And those are just little things to kind of like bring you back in. There are times, other postures, one of the things we'll do communally is we'll do a metania, which I'm not aware of a parallel to this in other traditions that's done regularly, but it's basically a stylized bow. So we make the sign of the cross, and then we bow like that. And then the metania, with an added step, becomes a prostration. And that's the normal move. And as I've seen it with Islamic worship, you stay in that position for some time. And for us, we can, but it's more of a transitional thing. As I said, I hurt my knee, but I'm going to try to do it to show you. So and then we down like that. And of course, to especially Protestant Americans who have for generations not had a king and not been in the habit of bending a knee to anyone or anything, that feels really weird. And they really recoil at that sort of thing. Whatever we're bowing in front of, we're not worshiping. Worship is reserved for God. But we will oftentimes make those things in the presence of a cross or an icon. We don't think that cross or that icon is God or an extension of God or anything like that, but rather they are icons, they are symbols pointing towards God. And so we're seeing whatever's in front of us, helping our minds to kind of make that journey from earth to heaven. And then we're doing what we can to actually change our physical space and our posture so that there's some movement in body as well. So we're asking our soul to move, to get out of the rut and to connect with God.
Yeah, no, normally our postures, physical postures, we sit in a erected position, in body in a straight position, and we normally fold our hands like this while praying. That's one way of praying how we involve our physical body. And there is a meditation posture as well when you meditate very silently in the pin drop silence. Basic intention of doing meditation is bring your mind into being in the present moment, where we are right now, rather than falling in the thoughts of what happened previously or what will happen, or avoid anxiety, what is going to happen in future. So a meditation posture is you would stretch your hand and close your eyes and try to listen to some hymns, or you bring in some divine thoughts, like a scenic place you visited, and some good thoughts, and meditate upon those thoughts. And there is another for one particular god, we do some physical like this one, like this. If you this is one way of praying as well for one particular god. So these are the various physical postures we do.
I'm mirroring a lot of what you're saying, but I mean, I'm not even going to get up and talk about the organized prayer, because it's basically, it's almost what you just showed. I mean, we spend most of our time with our hands locked, standing, and we read verses from the Quran, and then we do the same thing. We bend our backs, stand up, and you get down on the floor and bowing like you just did, and then you would sit for a little bit, and then you get back up, and you do that 4 or 5 times, 3 or 4 times, depending on the prayer. I would like to mention, though, in terms of like connecting to the earth or having something that connects you to it, an interesting concept that I like to think about sometimes is after you've died, what you leave behind, how you're still connected. You know how everyone says you can't take it with you when you go, right? But in Islam, there's 3 major things that will keep affecting your status with God after you're gone. There's Sadaqah Jariyah, which is a charity that carries on. So say you donated money to build a mosque, that would, every person, every time that mosque is used, everything it's used for still benefits you while you're in the grave. And if you have a child who's a pious child, they'll keep praying for you, keep doing good deeds. Anything you taught them, carry on for you. And then just being a teacher, if you taught anyone anything useful, if you taught them how to read the Quran, maybe you taught them some prayers, every time they do that action that you taught them, it adds something to you. So that's a way to sort of connect yourself to the earth, like the prophet once said that even if the end of time is a day away, if you have a seed planted, because the few minutes that seed grows will give you some benefit just before your time is to leave. So that's really interesting.
And so we're also kind of in the same kind of realm of physicality. We're also curious kind of about different spaces or environments that you put yourself in. A few different spaces that you pray in or meditate in. Do they help you better connect with the divine, or do you rely on different spaces for different situations? Kind of how does that look in your life?
So every observant Orthodox Christian, and just a quick little caveat here. Have you noticed any time in a newspaper or on Wikipedia, anytime someone even goes to church like once a year, maybe, they'll always be called a pious Christian, pious something. Like, it's a pretty low bar as far as that goes. So results may vary, I suppose, but most observant Orthodox Christians will have some kind of a prayer nook in their home, some sort of space set apart, and some are more elaborate and some are simple, especially for newer members, and we got a lot. I'm always on them to just keep it simple when you start. I don't want them to burn too hot, but to have an icon or two, to have some source of light, maybe a cross, and then certainly a prayer book, and maybe a little space to burn incense if they want to do that. We, in our parish, we have a main church building that seats around, we're packed in 500 or 600. And then for our daily services, we have a chapel that doesn't have pews, so people are forced to stand the whole time. We do have chairs along the wall for older people who have to sit down. We use the chapel for the overwhelming majority of our weekday stuff. That way things can just be more intimate. The chapel is acoustically better. It's a newer building. The air conditioning works better. So that's great. But we have that. But people, will make space, and they can make sacred spaces out of anything. My wife's car, she always has icons in the car. That's something I don't even do. But for her, she is a trauma nurse. She works in the emergency room. And so when she gets off work, it's quite possible someone just died, or someone nearly died. Or she had some sort of a really spiritually difficult encounter. And so for her, she gets a lot of praying done in that car on the ride home. And that's a way that she makes that possible and kind of makes that real. Since I work at the church, I can pop over and use any of those spaces anytime I want to. We have a little space at home as well. So I am in no lack or no need of having spaces. I got all sorts of spaces here. And I'll encourage people to go on prayer walks. I really do think Kentucky is one of the most beautiful states in our country. There's almost not an ugly part of Kentucky. And we just vacationed in the Red River Gorge. If you haven't been, it's an hour and a half away, for goodness sakes, like go this weekend. It's incredible, and there are just so many beautiful places here. it's hard not to feel some sort of connection to the divine. You're in a really beautiful place like that. I cover all the bases.
And yeah, normally we have some dedicated prayer rooms at our homes. I'll show you one of ours. And even in the temple also there are various deities. And normally we sit in the floor on a carpet to pray. And the one we have at our home, let me show you, would look like this one. Are you all able to see? And this is the lamp I was talking, which we lit every morning. And these are the prayer books you can see. So that's our prayer room within our home. And as he said, I do even chant if I'm going to work, if I'm driving. I sometimes play a prayer CD on, and I chant along. And sometimes in the bus also, I just plug in my earphone, and if I'm taking a track bus, I chant normally in the morning, especially in the morning, till the time I reach downtown. So it can be at home in that particular room. It can be in the temple. It can be while traveling, and sometimes I do listen to some talks as well about Hindu scriptures, various books. The explanation. Someone will be explaining, especially our holy book called Bhagavad Gita, which is in Sanskrit, but there are a lot of explanation given in English and in our native language, which we are able to follow very easily.
Yeah, for us, whether it's traditional or non-traditional prayer, or if it's reading the Quran or whatever it is, there are very few specifically more spiritual places. It's basically a free-for-all. You know, I could get up and start praying here if I wanted to. It's just as valuable. And I could be in the car and reading. You know, they have apps with the Quran on it on your phone, so you can just pull it out anywhere you want and start reading. But if I had to pick, the easiest would be a mosque, because that environment is set up to be more religiously stimulating, I guess, for lack of a better word. So when you're in the mosque, it sort of puts you in a zone, and you know, quiet spaces and spaces with less like decorations around are usually preferred. So that's why like the prayer room and the library is always a nice place to go to, even though like I could go out in the quad and pray and it would be just as valuable in terms of like spirituality. It's sometimes nicer to go to a quieter place, sort of a more personal space. And of course, that doesn't apply so much with communal stuff, but when you're in a community and everyone else is doing the same thing you're doing and feeling the same way you're feeling, privacy is less important. But yeah, I would say a mosque is the easiest choice.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Yeah. So just tell me if I'm wrong on this.
Sure.
Like I saw Nurli's, it looked kind of a lot like one of our icon corners actually in our home. That's kind of, you know, yours was maybe more elaborate than some, but I don't know. I've been in places that look like that. But from what I kind of just heard there, and I'm by no means an Islamic scholar or anything, but
really?
But yeah, no. Well, I do have an undergraduate degree in religion, so and I'm in a Middle Eastern church.
Oh.
So yeah. But Islamic sensibility, you said you prefer a place with less ornamentation.
Yes.
Right. Okay. And would you say that's consistent with most Islamic sensibilities for prayer, where you prefer? And I know a lot of mosques are.
Yes.
Okay,
I would say most. It's actually one of the signs of the end of time that mosques will start decorating more, and the Prophet sort of said that as like a bad thing, like really like competing to the. My mosque is so massive and so beautiful. It's like that's sort of like I'm not really encouraged very much. Like here in America, where they really don't care, you just set up a mosque because you need somewhere to pray.
Right.
Then a lot of mosques are just like, it's like an old school building that they'll put together, and like the walls are just white plaster.
Right.
And
Right.
that's
So
it.
for you, in general, though, a more Spartan place is preferred, and I think for us,
It's more.
it's
Yes.
more is more.
You want to
Right.
We don't have like a picture of the Prophet up, or
No, right.
we don't have like a crescent that we set in front of ourselves as we pray. Although that happens for some people, like Some Shiite sects will have
Right.
like a stone or a cloth that they'll lay down in front of them. But in terms of Sunni Muslims, less is more.
Right, right. Thanks.
So I just kind of want to wrap up by asking if there's anything that I did not ask today that you think is important to note about prayer or meditation in your specific tradition.
I think your questions were good. They were leading questions. I think it gave us, in a very respectful way, a way for each of us to kind of answer and speak. I think you'd alluded to this in the written questions at least, but like maybe what role music plays or tones. There is kind of a historical link even between like the Muslim calls to prayer and Byzantine chant. And then obviously Murli mentioned chanting being a thing. So there are kind of a common chant traditions here. And then even Gregorian chant, you know, musically and historically is related to Byzantine chants and to different chant traditions. So I don't know, maybe that's just kind of a thought. Music is critical to us. Basically every time we meet, things are going to be sung. There are a few priestly prayers that historically the priest would have more or less said to himself. Now we say some of those out loud so people can hear them. But if we're not praying those, then we're singing. And chanting, of course, is just a stylized singing. It's just, you know, that's all chanting is. And so I think that's a critical feature of probably all of our traditions, chanting.
Yeah, we usually don't incorporate instruments. That's like a no.
Right.
But
Same as us, yeah.
yeah, in terms of just like tuning your voice and sort of making it melodious, very much so.
Yeah, I think we pretty much covered most of the things.
All right, well, thank you to our
Thank
panelists
you.
for kind of sharing some insights. Does anybody have any questions for the panelists?
I have a question for Father. You mentioned that, you know, you will prostrate yourself in front of like crosses and icons, like in remembrance of God, and not worshiping them. In front of the Eucharist, which is Christ, are there more specific things you do because you are like worshiping Christ in the Eucharist?
So that's actually a really kind of interesting question. So there is no rite within that I'm aware of in Eastern Christianity and any of the Eastern Christian traditions for Eucharistic adoration. That doesn't mean there's anything in our theology that's against it. Like in a sense, it almost kind of makes sense. Why wouldn't we? But we just don't. But we do have different ways of honoring it. So I mentioned making the sign of the cross a lot. The reserved sacrament is kept on the altar at all times. So rather than being kept in a, and remember our bread is leavened, so it's actual bread, it's like loaf style bread rather than wafer style. So it is cut into small cubes, dried, and then kept in a special place on the altar. Anytime we cross the middle line of the church, we make the sign of the cross. And if we can, we make the sign of the cross and we bow. Old school Catholics used to genuflect for that same reason. And so we continue to do that just to remember that our Lord is with us in a special way. I think partly just practically, it is not as visually stunning to just see like a gold or a brass box that's closed as it is to see, you know, if you have a large host and what are those called? A monstrance, right? That, you know, you can see it and it's very visual and I think it kind of makes sense. And we also have an abundance of, this is a real broad brush statement here. Okay, there are plenty of exceptions to this, but in general, the divine office of morning and evening prayer has ceased to be as common a practice in Western traditions as it's continued to be in the Christian East. And so there was kind of a hole to fill. People had mass they could go to, but they wanted to do something else. And I think that it allowed for a devotion like that to kind of raise up. Good question.
If I might come in on that question, in terms of praying towards something, Muslims are, like we were talking about, less is more, very particular about that. Like even when you're praying normally, you're not supposed to allow people to walk in front of you. If you walk in front of someone who's praying, that may suggest that you're praying towards that person. There has to be some sort of block in front of you. So it's very much off bounds. Some mosques will even have like little signposts like set to the side, and you can like take a signpost and set it up in front of yourself so that people can walk around the signpost and not. And so like if there was a picture on the wall, that would be a big no-no.
Okay.
If there was like a statue, that would be a big no-no. We're very much like, we're supposed to be shooting for the Kaaba, and if we can see someone in front of us, that's not okay. Like when you're doing the organized prayer, when you're doing the traditional prayer, you're supposed to be very focused and just doing the gestures that you're supposed to, you're not supposed to be like scratching your ear or like looking around or something like that. You're supposed to be focused in. But the one exception to that rule is if someone is about to walk in front of you, you're actually allowed to reach out and stop them, because like this is a huge no-no, and then you go back and doing your normal prayer. I just wanted to comment.
No, that's interesting. To that point, we always pray facing east. And so, functionally speaking, here we're facing the same direction as you all, right? Functionally speaking, the difference is that Christians, east of Mecca, continue to pray facing east. Always east, because the world, is round, and they knew that. And there are many reasons for that, but probably the most common was just the idea that when our Lord returns, whenever that will be, and kind of apocalyptic end time scenarios. I mean, every tradition has some of that, but those haven't normally gotten the kind of traction in Eastern Christianity that they have elsewhere. So who knows when that will be, but when our Lord returns, he'll come in the eastern sky. And so that's why all traditional churches, including Catholic churches, the overwhelming majority of old Protestant churches were built facing east. And that's important. All old cemeteries, all old Christian cemeteries were built so that if the person were to be resurrected, and you just think like a movie, it's like, Night of the Living Dead type scenario, right? They would just like come up and then they would be facing the east. So that direction is important to us. And for you all, right, it's facing the Kaaba.
Yeah, the Kaaba, and even when we're buried, you're buried facing the Kaaba.
Right.
So yeah.
I have a question. So all of your religions are based, and some of you even have come from other countries. And so I wonder what differences you note in American practice compared to practice in other countries. Is it very similar? Is it different?
Sure, I'll take that.
Morale wants to say something. I mean,
I can't hear you.
Merely, I think you're
You're
muted.
muted.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's the same. We follow, since we came from India, we follow the same tradition here. And I notice most of the other Hindus as well, they follow the same pattern, what they do in India. Exactly same structure, even the temple, the way they build the temple, it's all the same as we follow back from India.
yeah, in Islam,
There is no much difference, what I meant to say.
yeah, in Islam, it's usually just a few subtle things that you would notice being in the Middle East and then coming back over here if you were like a Muslim. Like I said, less is more. Usually in the Middle East, like I lived in the UAE for most of my young life, they're very serious about decorating their mosques. They want the big chandelier, they want like designs on the walls and stuff like that. And most people don't really care because a lot of people aren't super strict about it, but generally that's supposed to be discouraged. And then there's other smaller things like, it's almost as if when you're removed from the homeland, you become more connected to it in a strange way. And so often like prayers here will take hours. You know, people stand in prayer and read, and you're like, okay, are you gonna be done? You know, like, I can't stand here forever. But back home, it's like 15 minutes, you know, like, okay, there's another prayer, everybody get in, we're done. You know, like if you're like 5 minutes late, you basically missed the whole thing. And so there's a strange sort of like stronger commitment or spirituality here rather than there, which is really weird. Since like being over there, I'm like, I'm in the homeland, you know, this is where everyone around me is Muslim and it feels a lot more communal. But then over here, there feels like there's more of a dedication, more of a seriousness about it.
For us, I would certainly say for everything that kind of counts, we're the same. There are a few differences that the more conservatively minded might notice a few things that are different. But there are differences even, once again, I said we have different flavors. In general, the Slavs, like Russians, tend to be among the most conservative in disposition, particularly in liturgy. And so things haven't changed there at all in 400 years. We know that because we know what books they printed. And they zealously guard those things. The Greeks and people that are kind of in the Byzantine tradition, which we are more or less a part of, tend to be more loosey-goosey. And stuff will come up that they like, they'll try some new stuff. So, I mean, little small things, right, here and there. You know, adding a few elements to this service or to that service. But by and large, things are the same. The most dominant thing, if you visited a traditional country, and this is like in real time, here's something that changed a lot. Most women in most Orthodox churches in the United States don't wear head coverings. And in most countries, now in Greece, that's less of a thing. But in all of the Slavic lands, that's universally adopted. There is no advanced theology behind it about women having to submit and how dare you show your hair, or there's nothing like that, okay? So don't think we teach that because we don't. In Orthodoxy, it's enough to do something because we've always done it that way. Like that's the received tradition, that's our starting point. So you have to have a reason to change it, right? Now, what's curious though is that, I mean, we're not talking that long ago. This is really in the 50s that things started to shift here. And I asked older women at my previous church who remember growing up and every woman wore a head covering, and then they just stopped. And they couldn't remember why or when. They couldn't remember someone preaching against it or the women organizing, and they just stopped doing it. And no one could remember why. And I've literally, like I'm gonna write an article on this for a journal one of these days, but I can't find anything. It happened everywhere at the same time. And no one talked about it. I have no idea what happened. And it just, the only thing I can think is that that was around the same time that everyone stopped wearing head coverings. Because that was around the time that men, I mean, a lot of your great-grandparents, you look at photographs, they're wearing hats, right? Women wore hats when they went outside. And the best theory on that is that we started driving cars. And it's a pain to take the head covering on and off in a car. And so that stopped being part of going out attire. And that's the best theory I got. But that is still something that, so in the old countries, that's still the case. If I'd love to know more, but I don't.
I won't get into women and scarves.
Oh, the head covering thing, yeah.
Yeah, I'll leave that alone.
Yeah, I wasn't baiting you. But even that, I think, is a much more complex issue than
Of course,
people.
yeah.
People.
But you were like always traditionally, the women have worn headscarves and like bells are going off in my head.
Right, yeah.
Any other questions for our panelists?
I have a question for you, Father. If you could you had kind of very briefly mentioned like prayer walks, if you could like expand on that and like, you know, if you could expand them and kind of, that looks like for you.
So kind of the default paraliturgical practice in the Orthodox Church is the Jesus prayer. So in the Catholic tradition, it's the Rosary. Now you all have, I think you both have prayer beads, right? Yeah, in traditions, I don't know.
Ours are very much not like mandatory in any way.
Right, yeah, ours aren't either. Yeah. So it's paraliturgical. It's so in other words, it's not part of like the regular organized life of the church. It's something you can do. So the Jesus prayer was a monastic prayer. Who knows exactly where it developed? Probably in the monasteries, either in Egypt or in Palestine. And it's, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. Or it could be, have mercy on me, a sinner. Some people add that. Mercy, don't think of it in terms of really harsh judicial, like a judge is going to have mercy on someone. Well, I was going to hang you, but I'm just going to sentence you to a lifetime of hard labor. It's not that kind of mercy, okay? It's a broader form of mercy. It's that I participated in sin. I've wounded people. I've forgotten you. Have mercy on me. In other words, lessen the severity of the things I've participated in. I've been born into a world that's sick and hurt. Grant mercy on me to be freed from the consequences of those things that even I can't help. Okay, so it's a very broad understanding of mercy. I didn't bring this to show this off, but this is a prayer rope. It's a really interesting knot that is perfectly squared, and it has two thread, like two strings basically going in, and then I don't know, it's like 50 steps, and then two strings come out the other side, and the knot is almost perfectly round. Okay, so it's kind of a thing, and this instead of something like a rosary or prayer beads because it's quiet. And once again, silence is important and key. And so you would say, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. And you'd pass another bead. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. And then you just take a walk. And you breathe. And Mary said a lot about silence. And there are a lot about being centered, in the present moment. Mindfulness, you'll find something about that in almost every religion. And that is critical because that's all we have. We cannot control the past. We have such limited control over the future. All we have is right now. And so you go outside, you get some fresh air, you get some sunlight, you give thanks to God for the moment that you're in. And just saying that simple kind of repetitive prayer, it's not magic by any means, okay? It's not like if you do this, then you'll get this, okay? You do it because it helps you to remember and to stay centered. And if you say it 3 times or 10 times or 300 times, it's just a good, helpful thing.
All right, so we are just about at noon, so we are just about out of time. But I want to extend a huge thank you to all of our panelists for coming and staying in chat.
Thank you.
I hope that everybody something new today. I know I learned more. And for all of our audience, real quick.
And we also have t-shirts. When you give us your survey, we'll give you t-shirts. And stickers. So, thank you so much.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
And thank you to our.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is lovely.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure talking. Pleasure.
Yeah, no, y'all. It's nice having you in person. Last year when we did this, it was
Yeah, it's not quite the same.
virtual and like you couldn't just bounce off each other as much. So I love that you all were able to find so many commonalities and like